This is The Unfortunate Consequences of Progress in Philosophy by Bryan. This says it's forthcoming in the Rutledge Handbook of Philosophy of Disagreement. So, Adam Fighter, what's up? How you doing? So yeah, we were just gonna, like, it's been a overly exciting little bit of time. Yeah, you're right on time for this one. And so I was like, I just want to calm down and read a fucking paper at this point. So feel free, as always, to comment, chime in, and we'll see what's going on here. Thanks again to Vipers for suggesting the paper. All right, here we go. Yeah, the grind. We tend to think that philosophical progress, to the extent that it exists, is a good thing. I agree. Even so, has some surprising, unfortunate consequences for the rationality of philosophical belief. Hold your horses, my friend Bryan Francis. Who ever called philosophy rational? Hold your horses. Right there. Drinks. What's working? What's working? I saw the drinks. Raise hand. What's going on? I don't know what's happening anyway. No one ever claimed philosophy was rational. It's pissing people off? Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah. Philosophy is more closer to fiction. You're making shit up a lot of times. I'm not angry. Well, I'm a little bit. Rationality is the heart of philosophy. Rationality is art of, like, working through philosophy. A lot of philosophy is not all that rational. So it's like, well, belief, like philosophical belief, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, well, good philosophy, exactly. See, right there, Ivan, right there. You can't just be like, the philosophy I like is rational. There's a lot of philosophy, and you don't get to cherry pick what you call rational as the only philosophy. Like, I don't get to say, well, all the stuff that is crap is not philosophy. It's not up to me to decide that. So yeah, that's the problem right here. I fear already that this person has cherry picked the things that like they started off from the position of the things I like are like, I'm just afraid they're doing negative meta induction, where they say, oh well, philosophy changes, people have different opinions over time, and so, you know, there's no reason to think that my philosophy is going to last. The same thing as any scientific theory. Unreal Bryan, what's up? I'd say imagination is important, creating new concepts and working out their consequences, some of which will pan out to be useful and most won't. Exactly. A lot of philosophy is more like fiction, where you're doing creative, imaginative work, where you're thinking about stuff that may or may not have anything to do with the world. And you don't know at the time. And you have to test it out, and that's philosophy too. You know, you try out ideas. Viper says, we technically haven't started, and there's an argument already. Okay, here's some advice I got when I was an undergrad, and this was from a professor I didn't agree with, but he was definitely right about this one. You have to catch philosophers early, because once they get going, they're not going to stop. Once they get their little system set up, they're just going to, like, keep going, and you won't be able to stop them. So if you're going to get somebody in philosophy, usually you have to get them early, and this is as early as you get. Like, the first sentence here, we tend to think that philosophical progress, to the extent that it exists, is a good thing. That's a platitude. No one gives a fuck. And I agree, that's a platitude. No one gives a fuck. And their first claim here, you might as well hit them right as they go. I'm afraid your arguments will be quite inoperable by the time your friends arrive. Thank you, Ivan. Grab them by the system, yeah. And it says, very useful advice for when you bump into one on a Friday night out. Yeah, exactly. As soon as they start talking about Wittgenstein, you tell them you gotta go. Exactly. Well, that is also a philosophical argument from Diogenes. He proved by walking. He got up and he walked away. Philosophers argue about arguments and disagree about disagreements. Yes, they do. That's the job. I mean, that's like descriptive. That shouldn't be a criticism, Unreal. That's just how philosophy is. Yeah. What is it called? Solvitare ambulando. Yeah. Solved by walking. Okay. Yes, the epistemic upheaval and progress. So this may just be a parallel argument to negative meta-induction in science, which says all the theories in science have been proved false over time, and something remains, but like it's not clear what. And so that may just be the same thing at the philosophical level here. We will find out. In the bad old days, baseball pitchers were usually evaluated on their number of wins, win-loss percentage, earned run average, and number of strikeouts. Hitters were usually evaluated on their batting average, number of runs batted in, and home runs. No one who has kept up with the developments in judging baseball performance thinks this is a valuable way to go. Yes, this is exactly where we're going. Old methods of evaluation don't hold up. The reason for the shift is that the field of statistical evaluation of baseball performance has gone through a period of epistemic upheaval. Yeah, I know, Adam Fighter. So this is a scientific revolution. This is a revolutionary period in the Kuhnian sense. We're doing a Kuhnian revolution in epistemology. Yeah, whaling or walking, either way. I mean, yeah. Thanks to the work of Bill James and others, we have far better statistical tools for evaluating performance in baseball as well as other sports. As a consequence, many old arguments regarding such a performance are now viewed as almost primitive. What passed for a good argument 40 years ago is often judged naive today by experts anyway. The phenomenon of epistemic upheaval applies to philosophy as well. Much of the work from roughly 50 years ago concerning many philosophical topics is almost primitive compared to that of today. I will indicate what epistemic upheaval comes to in philosophy through 4 real-life examples. Okay, here's already we've got a problem here. Yeah, things from 50 years ago are problematic, but in philosophy we read stuff from 2,400 years ago and don't blink an eye. Like, we've got Plato, we got Aristotle. We've got the other classical philosophers. We don't blink an eye at 2,000-year-old philosophy. So why are we picking 50-year-ago philosophy and being like, yeah, well, this got problems? It's like, no shit. But, like, we also have very old stuff that we think is very good. So already we've got a cherry-picking, I think, going on right here. Oh, Ivan bats an eye, who do you root for baseball? I mean, are you a Cubs fan? Do you a White Sox fan, Ivan? I think Agni said before, but I forget who he was. Ivan says, reading Plato and philosophy is like reading Galen and medicine. No, it's not, because people still are Platonic in some areas, and very few people are reading Galen. Like, mathematicians tend to be very Platonic, and so if you want to understand mathematical Platonism, you can read Plato. Yeah, you have no interest in sports ball. Fair, but like, yeah. You bet not it's Sabine Hassenfelder? Yes. There are plenty of good things to bat your eyes at. Like, give a little blink in that direction. Okay. A reader even remotely familiar with the state of the art regarding vagueness will find little worth studying from before the 1950s, especially before 1975, volume 30, issue of Synthes on the topic. Nothing little. Okay. There was a subsequent explosion of good work that utterly transformed the area, particularly with Williamson's 1994 vagueness. The same is true of material composition with Van Inwagen's 1990 Material Beings and certain other key works published around the same time. Unreal Brian says, when I lived on, my daily commute took me past Wrigley. Being a Cubs fan rubbed off a bit. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. I think he read one of Sabine's books and he didn't love it, so he's a little bit down on Sabine, but I will let Ivan speak for himself. The philosophical study of consciousness was transformed in the 1990s and 2000s, starting with Chalmers' 1996, The Conscious Mind. More recently, such transformations happened in the epistemology of disagreement, with initial works by Francis, Kelly, Feldman, and Christensen. Over the last 50 or so years, epistemic upheaval has also occurred with topics in the philosophy of perception, the philosophy of biology, and other areas. She's not a Bayesian. Okay. Well, no one's perfect. That you have to just accept, like, flaws in humans. All humans have flaws, so that may not actually be a problem if there's other things worth liking. Yeah. Well, let's not be overly sentimental about our personal favorites. Not every philosophical topic has experienced epistemic upheaval over the last 50 years, comparable to what we see for vagueness, material composition, consciousness, and disagreement, but a good number have. I've used well-known examples in order to indicate what I mean by epistemic upheaval. It's clearly tied to progress. Regardless of how one construes philosophical progress, the 4 examples above definitely involved overall progress, at least epistemic if not alethic. So epistemic and if not alethic. This is actually kind of a key thing. We think we know more now. That's the epistemic. That's the belief of knowledge. Alethic is truth, like truth regarding. And so we think we know more about the topic now. We definitely know more information. I don't know if it's more valuable information, but we definitely think we know more. She's not a babe. That's good, Empire. Yeah. Oh, that's true, Vipers. A little bit more information. Maybe you'll learn something new about it. Okay. So by the philosophical community on philosophical issues, overall, in order to allow for some backsliding and additional forward movement. Yeah. This person's hedging plenty. Whatever. That's okay. I won't offer a definition of epistemic upheaval since it turns out that none is needed for my arguments. Okay. Again, this just seems very scientific-y, Kuhnian revolution-y. In order to get a hint of the surprising argument of this paper, which concludes with negative news regarding the epistemic consequences of philosophical progress, pretend what it would have been like to be a philosopher of language working on vagueness in the late 1960s, but somehow aware that very soon there will be improvements that make many of the arguments and positions being thought of and discussed in the 60s almost primitive in a comparative sense. That would be fine. You'd be like, I was there for the revolution. That would be cool. It's like, the work we're doing now is going to be, like, transformative. Wouldn't that be cool? I bet that's not what they're going to say here. Perhaps an oracle informs you of these facts about the near future. Naturally, you're excited to learn these things. After all, the investigation to vagueness is about to make significant progress. This is cause for celebration and happy anticipation. But then you go back to your study and look at the vagueness papers you have already published or the new ones you have been working on lately. You can't help but ask yourself, what are the odds they contain good arguments and positions given what the oracle just told you? Well, that means you might also be winning the lottery. You might be the revolutionary that revolutionizes vagueness discussion. Oh dear. Yeah, careful out there, Ivan and Unreal, the people in the Chicago area. You should probably guess that the odds are pretty slim, provided 1, in those works you aren't arguing for logical truths that you can easily symbolize and then derive. 2, you are arguing for theses more ambitious than that argument of so-and-so has such and such flaw. And 3, you recognize that you are not a genius when it comes to philosophy. See, this is annoying. No one knows where the next breakthrough is going to come from, and no one knows they're a genius ahead of time. Like, you might have an inflated opinion of yourself, but the idea that, like, any one, like, paper might get exploded, no one actually knows that. So it's like, this is a little bit heavy. Chicago sends me a trash weather. You're welcome. So, sure, your essays on the topic might be publishable and good or even excellent for the present time in the sense that they are about as high quality as other essays being published now. The Oracle hasn't told you anything that should make you think that your work is worse than that of most other philosophers working on the topic now. Neither has she told you anything scandalous about the work being done by others at your time, but you know from the Oracle that the odds are very high that there are serious flaws in the work on the topic, so serious that your work will be viewed by near future experts as almost primitive. Yeah, but that happens in everything. So it's like, I don't feel special about that. Like, this is... We brought this up a few times. John Simmons is a philosopher. He signaled the warning drum about AI screwing with academic writing and teaching just before ChatGPT-4 dropped. And people mocked him. And he was like, we have to worry about this. And then he was right, and, like, you know, everyone conveniently forgot. Actually, I don't think people forgot. I think he got, like, you know, more speaking engagements on this. But, like, people were like, oh, it's primitive before. It's like, this is normal. This is the normal way tech proceeds. It's that, like, the shit we were doing doesn't matter as much. So I'm a little bit, like, this author is trying to build up something here, but it's a little bit suspect. Okay. Given that insight, what do you think now about the quality of your current arguments regarding vagueness or some other topic that is going through epistemic upheaval? 2. Major argumentative flaws. Just because there is going to be great progress in a field or on a topic doesn't suggest that all or most of the current thinking in that field or topic is mistaken. Exactly. They may be quoting you, saying what good work this was, and now we can do more stuff. Even if it's primitive. Stretch. Oh. Ups. One up, one down. And then do one up, one down the other way. When he wrote this paper, he didn't realize it was going to be torn apart on philosophy roulette. No one expects the philosophy roulette. No one. And moreover, he didn't expect that in the field of disagreement, it was about to explode in a new direction, and all of his work was going to become trivial and primitive. Yeah. Tindarios was wondering why other people don't read this stuff. And someone else actually had been reading papers on Twitch. And I was up too late the other night, and I saw like an icon on Twitch I didn't recognize. I clicked on the stream, and guy was reading paper on Twitch, a philosophy paper. Guy's out in India. This is why I never see him. He's in a different time zone. Yeah. My primary weapons are fear and surprise. You know, definitely I'm not coming from where people are expecting me from. That's the surprise is true. I don't know about the fear, but like definitely taking people by surprise. And so I'm tired and I'm actually drunk and I can't really chat. So I make a few dumb comments and then I say, you know what, have a good day, and I'm going to bed. And I do this, one of these, like, you know, have a good day and have a good bed. And I drop my emotes in chat. And the guy's like, oh my God, you're the philosophy roulette guy. He's like, I started reading papers because of you. I was like, oh my God. The only other person online that's doing this shit is because of me. It's like, yeah. It's like, yeah. So. Yeah, I have the minion. Wow. One guy out in India is kind of funny. Yeah. Well, yeah, saying to Tindarios, like, yeah, gotta be a little nuts to be willing to do this. Not everyone's gonna do this. Like, it's just not gonna happen. So, it's like, I'm not saying other people, like, it can't happen. I'm just saying it's unlikely. So, involve yourself as, like, true. Like, I know. How many form a cult? It's not, I don't know if I'm at cult level yet. You know, a lot of, I don't know if you see this in any of your other, like, communities you're in on Twitch, but a lot of people, like, this is not a cult, but kind of is a cult. Not a cult, but kind of is. So, there are places like that. Actually, quite a few. Let me actually, speaking of, let me see something. Okay, I don't have a cult emote. I think I've had a not a cult emote before, like where it just says not a cult, because this gets said a lot. Anyway. Yeah. Ads are back. Screw you, ads. Sorry if you get ads. Is it a duck or a rabbit? Yes. Okay. So, yeah. If you're doing work and you know that a revolution is coming, that doesn't mean you are wrong. For all you know, you're going to be the one quoted in the revolution as saying, this person laid the groundwork. Yeah. Yeah. Hail the holy duck rabbit. Exactly. Like I had a professor when I was an undergrad, and someone, like for you physicists out there, someone, he didn't win it, but someone won the Dirac Award. You know the Dirac Award, Ivan? Like the Dirac medal, I forget. It's like if you're gonna win the Nobel Prize in physics, that's one thing, but the next biggest prize, I believe, is like the Dirac Award. And so somebody won the Dirac Award, and they quoted my professor. Read from me from number 457. Yeah. So someone quoted, he got referenced in a Dirac Award-winning paper as having suggested part of like the experiment that they won the award for. It's like, that's a real feather in that professor's cap, because it's like, look, I'm a philosopher. I'm a theoretical physicist. He doesn't do any, he's in a philosophy department. He's a philosopher of science. He doesn't do any physics. He writes textbooks and papers on physics and philosophy of science, but part of something he suggested once led to a major discovery. It's like, yeah, just because some revolutionary thing happens doesn't mean you're not going to be part of it. Yeah. So, what do we got on Real Bryan? See real quick. No, I don't want notifications. Yes, the old Duck Rabbit War. There can be no peace until they renounce their rabbit god and accept our duck god. Exactly. Your book got damaged from the rituals. Oh dear lord. Okay. Not a cult. This is not a cult. Okay, so even if progress in mathematics is extreme, 50 years from now, we're still going to think that 4 times 4 is equal to 196, and more interestingly, there are infinitely many pairs of primes that differ by at most 600. This holds in philosophy as well. Even if over the next decade there's going to be all sorts of revolutionary work done in epistemology, for instance, we can be confident that the odds are quite high that each of the following claims won't be revealed to be seriously problematic. 1. 2 people can believe the same thing, but one person's belief is irrational while the other's is rational. Yeah, I mean, you could believe, like, you know, the sky is blue for stupid reasons, and you could believe the sky is blue for the correct reasons. Knowledge is objective in this sense. Just because someone thinks she knows P doesn't always mean that she really knows P. Yeah, exactly. You can be right for the wrong reasons or whatever, but like, whatevers. And one can have a true belief P without knowing that P. Yeah, so you can believe something that happens to be true, but you may not rise to the level of truth, whatever that is. This guy is sad and he's Prozac. Yeah, this is all just Gettier luck cases, like epistemic luck. The sky's blue because if it was yellow, we wouldn't be able to see the sun. There we go. See, Vipers is the rational one here. Okay, so even so, it's informative to skim journal articles from 50 to 100 years ago. Don't go for the classics alone. Instead, open a bunch of journal issues at random and skim the ordinary articles that satisfy two conditions. They treat topics you know very well and that have subsequently undergone epistemic upheaval, comparable to the cases indicated in the previous section. If your experience is like mine, it won't be difficult to find in the vast majority of articles major argumentative flaws such as the following 6, which are worded as if by an honest, brusque journal referee. So this person is going back and being like, you idiots of the past that don't know the future. Look at the dumb things you've said. Like, this is smacking of being a little bit unfair to the past. Like, progress is hard fought. Very hard fought in all areas. All areas. And so, criticizing people in the past, being like, you didn't know this, you stupid fool, is like a little unfair. Not charitable. Unless the sun was blue. Not the paper with Sam Fox in it. Any book recommendations for our not a cult book? I have no recommendations, unfortunately. I too am something of a philosopher, yes. Alright, so the problematic premise. Let's see what this is. Let's look at the second premise, P2. The author thinks that it's unproblematic as she asserts it with complete confidence, no defense, and not even much comment. It might not even be stated in the article if the author is really unaware of its role in her argument. The author is apparently blind to the fact that there are excellent reasons to think that P2 is false. Reasons that she has no idea how to counter. In fact, we know today that P2 is highly contentious as the arguments against it are serious. Now, I'm not saying that P2 is false. All I'm saying is that she's relying on it as unproblematic and certainly isn't anywhere near as close to having that status. Sure, she could just respond by saying that she's assuming the truth of P2. That's fine. But that move certainly reduces the interest in her argument as her conclusion switches from C to if P2, then C. How not to be a cult for dummies, 3rd edition. Yeah. So again, seems like, of course, it's like, what's the hindsight's 2020? Hindsight's 2020, man. All right, well, fine. Ambiguous premise. There's a serious problem with premise 4. The author seems oblivious to the fact that it's crucially ambiguous in a philosophically relevant way. If you interpret it one way, then I agree with the author that it's unproblematic or at least highly plausible. But then under that reading, it offers virtually zero support for her conclusion. If you interpret it the other way, then it would certainly support her conclusion if it were true. Of course, we know that it's highly contentious when interpreted that way for reasons that she, like us, simply cannot defeat at all. I'm not saying that P4 really is false, but it certainly stands in need of a defense, where the author can just assume its truth, but then we have the familiar problem of the significant loss of interest in her argument. Alright, so these are all this is all reviewer 2 bullshit for people in academia, and you can say this about all the things in the past, knowing things what we know now with hindsight. Sure. Rights of Lucifer? What do we got? Okay, so we got straight up culty text stuff. Cool. That one looks like fun. Sure. Let's see. Occult library. Actually, let's go take a look. The Rites of Lucifer, the Satanic Rituals by Anton Sandor Levay. The ultimate effect of shielding men from the efforts of folly is to fill the world with fools. There we go. Sounds like a great quote. Herbert Spencer. The Satanic Rituals. Alright, can't really read this now, but maybe some day in the future. Once they get their system is going, recall the old teaching. Yeah. Wait. Not when they get their system going? I don't know what that means, Adam. Sorry. Call the old teaching. People don't appreciate history. And there's a reason. He also wrote the Satanic Bible? Ah, cool. Yeah. So more reviewer 2 bullshit from this little group of things that, we could say about things in the past. Perhaps all the premises are true, but the argument isn't inductively strong, let alone deductively valid. The premises don't do shit to support the conclusion. Yeah, so we now know that it doesn't work. Who the fuck are you? Oh, I'm getting spam. Oh, you suck. Spam. Ambiguous conclusion. The conclusion is ambiguous in a philosophically relevant manner. Interpreted one way, the supporting argument is great, but the conclusion is philosophically boring, even for the author. Interpreted the other way, the conclusion is definitely worthwhile, but by just about anyone's lights. But the argument doesn't support it, either validly or inductively, for reasons I already went over elsewhere. It's the prophecy. It's bad. Oh, that's too bad it's bad. Alright, so it's a mess. The argument is a total mess. It's hardly clear what the conclusion or the premises even are. There are multiple ways of developing it, but not in any way that remains at all faithful to the original and gives us premises that aren't highly contentious and that offer decent support for a worthwhile conclusion. Tweak. My criticism wouldn't mean much if the author could simply tweak her argument so that it was either valid or inductively strong, had premises that weren't highly contentious, and had a worthwhile conclusion. But I see no plausible way to do that, and more importantly, the author certainly gives no indication that she knows of any such way. Okay, so this is all like just reviews that this person has gotten on papers that like got rejected from good journals, or maybe crappy journals, who knows. This list is not exhaustive, but it captures a good portion of the flaws we actually encounter in philosophical arguments. Call these 6 plus closely related ones standard flaws. In saying that the main arguments of those articles suffer from standard flaws, I'm not saying that the articles are bad relative to the past or even to the present, or even the present. Argumentative quality doesn't fix the worth of a work of philosophy. For instance, merely articulating an interesting thought experiment can be an enormous advance, and even a definitely bad argument can be highly valuable if, for instance, it is both highly original and it can be repaired by someone else much stronger and retain a philosophically interesting conclusion. Yeah, like this is a lot of times all I really am hoping for. Even if I fuck it up, I hope like someone gets something good out of it. Undue magic. I know that sounds a little offensive, but I've been watching quite a few of these videos on this channel. What do you mean, like the Kabbalah mysticism thing? I mean, a lot of religions and other stuff have mystical sects or parts where they basically are saying that they have privileged viewpoints on reality and therefore can have more control or causal control over reality. I see them all the same. It's all the same sort of thing. We have the privileged view of reality that other people don't, and therefore we know what's going on better, and therefore we can control the world in ways that you can't. I don't see that. I mean, that's just the general schema of these things. I mean, does anyone have a privileged view of reality that other people don't, or like some secret information that everyone else does? I don't know of anything like that. But who knows? Maybe if you do read those books, you will get privileged information and be able to do those things. If it was that easy, people would do it, they'd study it, and they'd, make a science out of it, and then we'd have new technology. So I don't really, for the most part, it doesn't seem like there is anything like that. You watch the show, is very well produced. I mean, cool. If you can, but like, it's the same thing. Everyone's like, oh, we have the right view of the world. Yeah. Privileged for the price of only $49.95. Yes. He keeps Objective more like a history channel without ancient alien vibes. Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, this is like history of like how people are. Like, it's not a problem to talk about this stuff. Viper says it's an actual doctor talking about it, so it's more about how people thought than doing spells and shit. Yeah, and people still think this way. People still think that they understand the world better than other people. Always. People think this. And they think that their studies then therefore give them better insight and ability to, control the world. There's not a whole lot actually that's new about humans in that way. The idea that like you're going to have privileged insight that gives you godlike powers, people believe that. Yeah. So, I don't have any special things to say about the Jewish version of that, like the Kabbalah stuff. Nah, it's fine, I guess, if that's what you're interested, go study it. Like, yeah, Jewish mysticism, there's mysticism in Islam, there's mysticism in, like, Christianity. I know, like, just from the big Western monotheistic religions, but I'm sure there's, like, mysticism and stuff like that all over the place. pretty normal for religion, really. Or at least sects in religion, like different, like small sects of it, people do this. Okay. Yeah, so I don't mind being wrong as long as I get my point across. Like, I don't care if I fuck something up. It's like, you got the point. I was trying to do something interesting. Not everything's going to be perfect. This is the whole point of, like, this paper saying everything in the future is going to look at it bad. It's like, no, I still made progress. That was the point. Okay, but often enough, when we publish a paper that contains arguments we think, or at least hope, the arguments are valid, or at least inductively strong, contain premises that are inherently contentious, and have philosophically worthwhile conclusions, it's fine to have an argument for conclusion C that relies on assumption A that is highly contentious, as when you are not really presenting an argument for conclusion C, but for the qualified conclusion, if A, then C. But in this case, you don't want your other premises to be highly contentious. You approach your philosophy like I approach sex? Oh. We just want it to be like a little bit like mildly interesting. Just not fucking it up. Yeah. I just hope I get my point across. I mean, is that how you approach sex? Getting your point across? Even if it's bad, yes. Fair enough. I take what I can get at this point. He likes babes too, yes. With regard to the perusal of old pre-upheaval articles, I'm saying that they had those flaws when they were published. This is hindsight again. They're saying that's using modern standards on old papers. The old papers, they're saying they had those flaws, but again, that's under modern standards or contemporary standards compared to like the old times when there were a lot of information we didn't know. I mean, that seems unfair to criticize Newton saying you didn't understand relativity. Well, it's like, that was a flaw? Are we saying Newtonian mechanics is flawed because it doesn't account for Einstein's shaping of space-time? There's something a little disingenuous here. Like, I'm a little worried about it. Okay, for instance, it's not though the arguments had unambiguous premises back then, but have ambiguous ones now. Yeah, because we found out something was ambiguous. We might not have known that back then. So it's like, it's not like physics changed since Newton to Einstein, but like you're calling what your value judgment was, calling it a flaw seems a little bit unfair. So, decades ago, almost no one was in a position to figure out that those arguments had standard flaws, but the flaws were there anyway, waiting to be revealed. Ivan says, this paper seems to contradict itself. The progress in the development of the standard flaws, we may not have found them without the original mistakes. Exactly. Like, this is the point of progress, hindsight's 2020, but then calling those things flaws that we learned from doesn't understand the value of, like, learning from what happened. And, like, it had value then, and it's, like, not the same value it has now, but it's unfair to go back and call them flaws. The value judgment there of, like, calling it a flaw is, like, the valence is wrong. It's like, no, that was our learning material. It's not flawed. It's like saying Newton was wrong. It's like, no, we learned from Newton. Come on, man. It's like people don't appreciate history sometimes. And I'm not saying that, like, oh, get off my lawn. It's like, no, like, it's like the standing on the shoulders of giants crap. It's like, you don't have to, like, learn from history. You just have to have an appreciation that stuff came before you. And yeah, it was wrong, but people did what they could, and, like, making fun of people or, like, treating them poorly for what they did when they had less information is unfair. It's like, like you're being not nice. Well, you do think they were flawed and wrong. Yeah, but, like, they were not wrong. That's a nice way to put it. It's like, at the time, like, it was, I don't want to call it flawed. They were wrong, but, like, wrong in interesting ways. Yeah. Your time in Rikers Island isn't a character flaw. I learned a lot. Well, your time in Rikers Island isn't going to be a character flaw. If, like, you were a flawed person that ended you up in jail, I'm sure that's not how it is for many people, but, like, maybe it did fix you. But, like, yeah, you could have learned a lot. Seems fine. So it's like, yeah, it just seems like using the word flaw, maybe I'm harping on it. So I don't know. All right, so they're gonna pull it back a little bit. I restrict myself to what might be called harmful ambiguity. One can offer an argument using a predicate with multiple meanings, but the argument goes to under any consistent goes through under any consistent disambiguation. For instance, epistemically rational may have multiple meanings, but under each one, the author's argument has premises that are plausible, and the argument is valid or inductively strong, and the conclusion is philosophically worthwhile according to a sizable block of philosophers. In that scenario, the ambiguity need not be harmful. So yeah. You are wrong to a degree that is truly intriguing. See, that's the thing on your Bryan. Like the mistakes where you're like, if you're gonna say like Newton was flawed, it's like yes, but like it's like given his information he wasn't, and that's what Ivan was saying about being instrumentally not wrong. The Rikers Island Journal of Philosophy, yeah. I mean, there are a bunch of philosophers who do go teach philosophy in jails, actually. I've heard about this, and apparently everyone seems to get a lot out of it because the people in like these big jails are not the sort of people you get in philosophy classes, and so the experiences they have are very new to the philosophers, and then the people in jail really appreciate the philosophy because a lot of times they haven't had the opportunity to be acclimated or like learn about philosophy stuff, and so they really appreciate it. So like there may not be a Rikers Island Journal of Philosophy, but there might actually be a prison journal of philosophy somewhere. In fact, I think there is. Okay. The unfortunate consequences of epistemic upheaval. After learning that one or more of the standard flaws is true of the large majority of the primary arguments in articles published before a period of epistemic upheaval, I am pretty much forced by my own rationality and awareness to reason inductively that one or more of those flaws is probably true of the primary arguments in the papers I'm writing now, provided my current papers concern topics that are going to undergo epistemic upheaval. After all, I'm just an average philosopher. Oh, woe is me, just an average philosopher. And I'm not going around arguing for logical truths or overly modest theses of the form, Smith's argument has the following weakness. Yeah, this is just, now we've got to the meta-induction of from philosophy of science, where all the theories of the past science have been, overtaken by the theories of modern science. Like, yeah, scientific revolutions. Okay, perhaps there is no current upheaval with respect to the topic T that I'm writing today, and there isn't any strong sign of one occurring soon, but given that this is philosophy, isn't it highly probable that there will, in the next 50 years or so, be a period of upheaval for T, again comparable to those cases mentioned in section 1? If so, then it's highly probable that the farther future upheaval will show that it's highly probable that my work on T is flawed in the sense of having one or more of the standard flaws. Whether the upheaval is going to happen in the next 50 years or in the next few decades or even centuries matter not at all. Either way, one or more of the standard flaws is very probably true of my work now. We can complain about how progress in philosophy is not nearly as impressive as it is for physics, chemistry, and biology, but what we do know is that we philosophers are simply outstanding at finding serious flaws in arguments and claims, hence it's highly probable that in the future, the philosophical community could, given a bit of time and effort, show some of the standard flaws are true of my work. Yeah. So, like, I don't think it needs to be in the future. I just need to read it, and I poke holes in things. That's what I do. So, I'm sorry, world. But yeah. Not to be confused with Commander Riker's Journal of Philosophy. Yeah. There's two of him anyway. It's like a split thing for him. Yeah. Viper says, so what he's saying is that what makes modern philosophy better is the planned obsolescence. Yeah, I know. He kind of is just doing this future forward thing. Like, oh, philosophy will always be better in the future. And so, like, this stuff I'm doing now won't be that good. But, I mean, how do you get there anyway? Well, you make philosophy now, and that's better than the philosophy in the past. You don't make those mistakes. You see, this doesn't have a clear... we'll talk about the ambiguity. This does not have a clear sense of progress. And they said the author, I think, said they don't need it. I think that's not true. I think they do need a better sense of progress because maybe their sense of progress isn't, the progress in philosophy isn't subject to these sorts of problems, actually. I don't know. How else are you going to sell new philosophy? Yeah, I mean, you got to publish, man. Otherwise, you got to get tenure. From my lips to Tim Cook's ears. Philosophy, exactly. All right. Author says, if I've appreciated this probability fact probable fact just articulated, then what should my attitude be towards my current and past work, or even future work? It may be well worth publishing given the current state of the art, but should I believe the soundness or other cogency of its arguments? Adam Fighter says, even in writing code, you can work towards a weaker, unstable, bad code as you move towards the future. This is the thing, like, how progress happens is not so clear. And so assuming that you're like not actually doing useful work, it's like, yeah, people are going to use the better stuff in the future, but like you're only going to get there by like, you know, pushing forward here. And it's like, okay, well, am I the best philosopher, and my stuff going to last forever? No one knows this, first of all. And secondly, like, nothing would ever get done if everyone was like just racked with like, I'm not good enough ideas. So I was like, that's not really a good argument for not doing something. Like, yeah, are you going to be, I'm not going to be the best painter in the world, but like, I'm not a great painter, but like, again, that doesn't mean you can't help out and do stuff. And maybe you are going to be a good painter. You just don't realize it yet. How would you know? Unreal Bryan says, existential angst is made up by philosophers to sell more philosophy. Boom. And isn't existential angst just an old idea that's going to be superseded anyway? So, yeah. So, yeah, this is a little woe is me right here. It's like, come on, man. On top of ruins, really, yeah. I mean, everyone here that is dealing with, that is in the tech field knows the house of cards that tech is built on. Like the open source projects that are like one guy out in the woods somewhere not getting paid. Like there's a few of those that run like major projects. So what was that like vulnerability in Java that was like one dude like that wasn't getting paid, and like it took down like part of the like whole like quarter or like a third of the internet? Like, come on. So this is like, all of these things are like paradox of the preface. Like, oh, I'm going to make a mistake later on, so how do I believe what I'm doing now? Yeah. Logging library. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some logging library. Like J4C or something. I forget what it was called. Let's make this imprecise argument precise. Argument. I know that for any pre-epistemic upheaval article from the past, is highly probable that one or more of the standard flaws is true of its main arguments. Yeah, I'm getting like massive paradox of the preface vibes here. Anyone who doesn't know paradox of the preface, let's look that up actually. Preface paradox. The preface paradox, or the paradox of the preface, was introduced by David Mackinson in 1965. Similar to the lottery paradox, it presents an argument according to which it can be rational to accept mutually incompatible beliefs. While the preface paradox nullifies a claim contrary to one's belief, it is opposite to Moore's paradox, which asserts a claim contrary to one's belief. Okay, the argument runs along these lines. So, it is customary for authors of academic books to include the preface of their books statements such as, any errors that remain are my sole responsibility. Occasionally they go further and actually claim that there are errors in the books with statements like, the errors that are found herein are mine alone. So, 1. Such an author has written a book that contains many assertions and has factually checked each one carefully, submitted to reviewers for comment, thus he has reason to believe that each assertion he has made is true. 2. However, he knows, having learned from experience, that despite his best efforts, there are very likely undetected errors in his book, so he has also good reason to believe that there is at least one assertion in his book that is not true. See, right here, this one right here, this is exactly what we're doing in this paper. This is the paradox of the preface. So that's where we are, and you know, it's always the case. These people who don't like history, they always get bitten in the ass by like something historical that they didn't realize. And 1965 is just over 50 years from ago. It's more like 60 years or something right now. So it's like, yeah, maybe you should have read the paradox of the preface, and you could have referenced that here. Ha ha ha. Belief is completely binary. Ivan. Okay. So yeah. Let's see. Well, maybe they'll say it here. I don't even know. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, we were just here. This is the paradox of the preface. Well, paradox of the preface. Let's just put that in right here. Face. So I can remember it. Not so obsolescent now, sucker. Exactly. This paradox has been around for a while. It's got a Wikipedia page on it. It's like not like this ain't obsolete at all. Exactly, Unreal. Okay. It's easy to see that many of the arguments of those prior works have false conclusions, since their conclusions are mutually contradictory. But A is saying something else. The standard flaws are there a high percentage of time. A good way of arguing for this would be to take about 100 pre-epistemic upheaval articles chosen at random and proving that the vast majority of them suffer from standard flaws. Needless to say, no one is going to go through the trouble of doing all that. Well, I've gone through over 450 papers, and all of them have flaws, except for the ones I wrote. All I can... Actually, I don't think I ever read any of my papers on stream, so that's true. My statement is still true. All I can do here is report that according to my experience looking through the pre-epistemic upheaval articles, this was true of them. As mentioned before, this is not to say that I discovered or think those articles were rubbish or that none of them are worth reading today. As one might expect, certain articles are far less likely to have arguments with standard flaws. For instance, if you're arguing for a logical truth and you bother to do the appropriate symbolization and derivation with due diligence to what the relevant expert community thinks about the reliability of the operative inference rules, your argument is probably pretty solid. No, people argue in logic too. You just have to argue differently there. But yeah, the logic may be right, but the system may be garbage. People toss out old systems all the time, unless you're doing very, very formal work and you're just proving theorems. And then you're like, okay, in that system, then you have proved the theorem. More interestingly, if your conclusion is of the form, that argument suffers from this flaw, then there is good chance your argument has a true conclusion. But most of us aim higher, trying to establish more potent theses. From now on, only such aim higher arguments are intended. Yeah, like if you're just poking a hole in someone else's argument, then you might just be right. But then again, that's kind of not as interesting, unless it's a very big argument you're taking down. There's still a great variety and number of such arguments, with the conclusion such as, token identity theory is true, know-how reduces to know that, propositional content doesn't weakly supervene on internal physical properties and relations, or consolationism about disagreement is false, there can be artworks of great aesthetic value that are immoral, presentism is consistent with general relativity, etc. Roughly put, premise B says that you know that you're not significantly better than philosophers in the past when it comes to avoiding standard flaws in arguments. B, I know that for most any pre-epistemic upheaval article from the past, it is highly probable that one or more of the standard flaws is true of its main arguments. Then for most any pre-epistemic upheaval essay of mine today, it is highly probable that one or more of the standard flaws is true of its main arguments. If you knew you were vastly better than most anyone in philosophy, then condition B might be false applied to you. Yeah, if you're the greatest philosopher in the world, none of this applies. Congratulations. For the remainder, I will ignore you. For the rest of us, I need to defend B in detail. In my experience, many philosophers respond to claims similar to B with a comment that starts with, yes, but. 1. Yes, but I do philosophy quite differently from how it was done in the past, and the differences make it much less probable that my main arguments suffer from the flaws that infect the main arguments of the past articles, so the condition B in B is false applied to me. Remember what I said before, I don't care about being right all the time. I care about being interesting. So it's not yes, I'm like, yeah, so what? I'm more interested in being an interesting philosopher than like writing interesting papers than getting everything 100% right, because like I said, I'm in agreement. No one's 100% right. It's like, if you think you're going for universal perfection, you can't write anything. That's you'll be analysis through paralysis through analysis. You can't be perfect. You have to bite some bullets. That's just life. And so the idea that like this is a problem for this author sort of means that they have overstepped what the practical life that, the practicalities of life and the practicalities of doing work. So it's just a little bit unreasonable here. And unreasonable in the sense, because I hate the word unreasonable, it's impractical, not pragmatic, and you can't get anything done. So it would limit any output that anyone would have to actually think, okay, well, I am not going to get anything right, so it's just, why do anything? You don't know what is going to be valuable. So this person needs some epistemic humility to say, even though I'm going to be wrong, that doesn't mean it's not valuable. So I almost quote Ivan now. It's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life. That's not Ivan. Shut up. I know that's Captain Picard. I know that's Picard. Okay. Okay, so Author says, for example, most of my own published arguments over the past few years are obviously valid and have explicitly formulated premises and conclusions, even when I don't bother to symbolize them in published versions. My brainstorming documents, scribbled or electronic, are filled with symbolizations and derivations, even though I don't publish anything in the more formal areas of philosophy. The vast majority of arguments from 50 or more years ago don't have that kind of rigor, and the vast majority of philosophers didn't use that level of rigor in their personal notes either. So, author says, that's nice. I get a loving pat on the head. Yes, pat the philosopher. But it should be obvious that there is a real threat of wishful thinking here. Although I may have an advantage over the vast majority of philosophers from the past, that alone hardly suggests I am significantly more likely to avoid standard flaws. 2. Yes, but the topics I am currently writing about are so different from those of the past that the induction of in B doesn't apply to my work. If so, then perhaps the conditional B is false applied to you. That's possible provided your current work is really very different in kind from past philosophizing. For most of us, however, that simply isn't true. I formulated 1 and 2 in the first person because that is how I usually hear them. The argument's conclusion below seem a bit insulting, embarrassing, or at least worrying, and people tend to react by defending their own case. We focus on ourselves and ignore the universal quantification over philosophers in general. We can, of course, be forgiven for wondering how well the argument applies to oneself, but it's unwise. Oh god, I just got your joke, Vipers. I'm sorry, I fucked that up. Ugh, I was like, why was he saying that? That's not funny. And then it was funny. I was like, fuck. Ugh. My apologies. Drink more water. And now you see my secret. I'm reading and thinking about different things. Where was I? One can, of course, be forgiven for wondering how well the argument applies to oneself, but it's unwise to do this when assessing this argument, since the argument's scope is thousands of times wider than just you or me. 1 and 2 are no good unless they apply to a great many philosophers. Therefore, in order to evaluate the arguments more objectively, ignore how it applies to you and your favorite philosopher friends, and focus on how it applies to philosophers today in general. The next objection to B is similar to 1. 3. The argumentative standards are much higher now compared to decades ago. So even though there were many standard flaws back then, things are better now. No, that's just false. But okay, whatever. In effect, most, not all of us, are the epistemic superiors of most, not all, philosophers from the past. Hence, the conditional in B is false when applied to most of us today. I think the first 3 sentences of 3 are true for many areas of philosophy, and perhaps it means that today's argument have fewer standard flaws compared to the old days. I disagree with this paper right here. No, I don't think we're any better than people in the past. Like, that's just wrong to me. Even so, that hardly means the final sentence of 3 is true for 2 reasons. First, there is reason to think that although the frequency of standard flaws has decreased, it has not done so by much. In particular, the increased rigor will help significantly diminish the frequency of flaws, unsupportive and mess, but not so much for the other 4 flaws. Second, perhaps there is another way that philosophy is done differently now that actually increase the frequency of standard flaws or a subset of them, thereby offsetting the improvement brought on by the more common attention to making arguments valid and explicit. So I don't think there's much ground for thinking the conditional in B is false for most of us today. Perhaps the probability of standard flaws is lower today, but it's still great enough to be high, as B says. Yeah, I don't think we're not any smarter than they were in the past. We're not making those mistakes, but like there's still plenty of mistakes to be made. All right, so C. I know that for most any article I'm working on today, it's highly probable that it is a pre-epistemic upheaval article, whether the upheaval is imminent or decades in the future. Yeah, exactly. Unreal Bryan, you fix one thing, you break 3. This is the thing. You make progress, you realize that something you thought was solid, you realize is not. That's how a lot of philosophy goes. You get one conclusion or solution, and you find 3 more questions now that you find interesting. Like, this is why I'm saying the notion of progress here is wrong for philosophy. We find out we were making assumptions that were bad. That is the progress. Not that like our arguments are more cogent, sometimes that we have better questions. Better questions are progress in philosophy. And better questions might be that like we now see that arguments from the past were wrong for some reasons, but like, or they're smart for different things, but like better questions are the progress, not like following abstract rules. 99 little bugs in the code, 90 little bugs in the code, take one down, pack it around, 117 little bugs in the code. Exactly. Okay, for most topics most of us are writing today, it is highly probable that eventually we'll experience negative epistemic upheaval. In fact, it is difficult to think of many philosophical topics that haven't experienced such upheaval over the last century or so, and would be wildly optimistic to think that typical topics have now finally reached a point at which negative upheaval won't happen anymore. My argument should not be thought to fail if a huge meteor destroys civilization tomorrow. We know that if philosophers were to live and work in the next few decades in something even approximating the fashion we actually have for the last century, then for almost any topic that we are actually writing about now, it would go through a period of negative epistemic upheaval in the next few decades. That's the understanding behind the premise C. A through C support intermediate conclusion D. Hence, from A to C, I know that for most any article I'm working on today, it's highly probable that its main arguments suffer from standard flaws. The italicized claim in D will look bad, embarrassing, or at least worrying to many readers, but we should keep in mind what D is not saying. And keep in mind, this person's writing on this paper now, and so this clearly will be wrong in the next upheaval about disagreement. But that's not what they were saying. D is not saying just because an argument has one or more standard flaws doesn't mean its conclusion is false, or that other arguments, philosophical or not, offer excellent evidence for the conclusion of the flawed argument. Yeah, exactly. A huge meteor destroys Earth. IT manager. Call it user error. So much, what's the best acronym I saw? There used to be called something like ID10T, which if you write it out, looks like idiot. So the problem, it's ID10T. And then people can also say picnic. The problem was a picnic. Problem in chair, not in computer. So picnic. I like that one. It was a picnic. Okay, so secondly, neither is there any reason here to think that the flawed arguments are worthless relative to current or even future state of the art, since flawed arguments have significant virtues, as pointed out earlier. Yeah, all of them, if all of them have problems, then saying it has problems isn't actually a strike against it. None of these considerations show that philosophers are irrational in believing various philosophical positions. After all, they might not have put any thought into these unsettling facts about negative epistemic upheaval. That's weak, but okay. Neither do they show that such philosophers are irrational if they know that there will be negative epistemic upheaval on their topics, but stick with believing their positions anyway. Again, they might not have thought things through like we are doing here. That's always fair. Like there's things in one area that bear on things in another area. You can't know all the things, but that's normal also. Neither do they show that philosophers are irrational if they know that there will be negative epistemic upheaval on their topics, but stick with believing their positions anyway. Again, they might not have thought the things through like we were doing here. Again, yeah, just because things are going to change in the future, that doesn't mean your work is worthless now. Work now leads to progress in the future. That's how you get there. Neither is there anything epistemically wrong with continuing to articulate and defend your views even after deeply appreciating the consequences of negative epistemic upheaval. There is nothing wrong with continuing to publish and professionally endorse those views. For example, I will defend thesis T now, as that can easily be done sans belief. For example, I've been doing it for many years, and I know that I'm not exceptional in that respect. Yeah. Okay. Alright, so however, D is unsettling. A quick read of the 6 standard flaws shows that if one or more of the standard flaws are true of an argument, then it's improbable that it meets this attractive yet modest 3-part condition. Under a single interpretation, 1, the argument is either deductively valid or inductively strong. 2, none of its premises is highly contentious. And 3, it has a philosophically worthwhile conclusion. Well, I mean, after reading over 400 papers on philosophy roulette, very few papers have philosophically worthwhile conclusions. That's a different problem, though. The D is unsettling you, Vipers? Okay. Okay, so this is, I mean, I could have told you this without this whole argument. You just read a lot of philosophy papers. Very few of them have philosophically worthwhile conclusions. All right. Recall the qualification from the previous section about employing highly contentious assumptions. Call that 3-part condition worth. Most of us want worth to apply to our arguments for aim higher theses. If you are forced to conclude that your arguments fail to satisfy worth, then your arguments would most likely be failures by your own lights. So, again, I don't subscribe to these things. I'm looking for interesting papers, and so this is not actually the worth that I judge papers by. And so this is kind of very funny, where this person has argued themselves into what they think is a very strong position, but like I just reject it outright. What is this little cutesy emote that you got there, Globus? How you doing, Globus? What's up? You know, I have not given anyone a shout out in a while. Let's give Globus a shout out. Shout out the Globus the Elder, who has a interesting talk show show here on twitch.tv/Globus the Elder, where he talks a lot about AI and like the future of science and what are we gonna do about stuff. And yeah, I was hanging out there a little bit before stream tonight, and we were just, you know, I like making snarky comments. That's kind of how it goes. So if you don't know Globus, it's worth dropping a file. Go check out some of his stuff. He has a cat on his shoulder. Like, I don't know how he maintains a cat on his shoulder, but he's one of these people with cats on his shoulder. And like, you can just be like, pet the kitty, pet the kitty. And it's like, cool. Yeah, it's like, it was funny. It's like, we're just not that creative, Globus. We're just not that creative. We're ending up in the Matrix. We're ending up with Skynet or like one of the other like just sci-fi shows. That's all we come up with. And it's like Globus was like, I was making jokes about like Skynet, and Globus is like, look, this is not Skynet. This is something else. And then later we got like, no, this is basically Skynet. It was a different thing, but it was like, yeah, this one was more like the Matrix, and then this one's more like Skynet. It's like, yeah, we're gonna have to be underground because we're gonna have like poison the earth, or the robots are poisoning the earth. Well, that's the Matrix. And then other ones were like Skynet. It's like, come on. Unreal Bryan says, my cats are more inclined to flop themselves across your keyboard. That happens. I don't know how Globus maintains it. He's impressive. But anyway, we're talking about progress in philosophy here, and this is a negative view of progress in philosophy, Globus. So it's they're saying, look, chances are we fuck something up. It's true. We always fuck things up. Is that a problem? And they're saying it is a problem. I'm saying no, it's not. Yeah. You said worst case. You said worst case. Fair. But like, I'm sort of laughing because I take a very light view of these things. I don't think we're going to have artificial general intelligence in the next 20 years. So I'm like not really worried about it at the moment. So it's like, I just find all this stuff very amusing. And so I'm just more happy to laugh at like, oh, Skynet again. You guys are so clever. Like Skynet. Thank you. The Terminator from like 1982 or whatever. And like I always say, I do have like a giant Tron poster in a room over there. Yeah. Okay. You think that since Plato or Thales, we've greatly expanded the scope of things that we are confused about? Yes, we have. Yes, we have. But like, these are more interesting questions. And it's like, so what is the worth? Are we really worried? Like, does everything have to actually be deductively valid or inductively strong? That's not where we get the worth from. That might mean it's worth taking a look at, but that shouldn't be where we are deriving worth from. The philosophically worthwhile conclusion does not come from being inherently well argued. Viper says a survey of experts revealed that 50% of AI experts will crack in 40 years and 90 within 80. Yeah, you know, I'm not so young. In 40 years, I'm going to be old. And so it's like, this is going to be a problem, but it's going to be a problem for another generation. And I'm not sure if I'm going to see it. Like, I don't know if it's going to be my lifetime. And I'm closer to the 80-year thing. So I know, like, people disagree about this. But, and I'd love to see some, like, really crazy, interesting stuff happen. And weird shit's going to happen one way or not. We don't need general intelligence for weird shit to happen right now. Like, plenty of weird shit's happening right now. So, in the next generation, okay. You think so, Ivan? That'll be cool. But, like, I'm more pessimistic on the tech. So, like, plenty of weird, bad, crazy artificial intelligence stuff I think is happening right now, and it's going to happen in the near future. I just don't think we're going to have, like, the singularity with, like, the true one. Yeah, disagree about both AI and what makes good philosophy? Fine. I mean, happy to disagree with some people and, like, have a discussion about it. But, like, see, I like to have the discussion about it. I don't care. Like, I don't care. This pissed off so many people when I was like an undergrad. The fact that I was there, like, you don't care about truth? I was like, not really. I care about interesting arguments. And they got, like, that pissed people off. That pissed off. I remember pissing off some professors. I was like, God, you guys have a very inflated, like, I didn't say this, but I'm like, you really think you're special, don't you? Like, come on, guys. You're not that special. Truth is justification. Yeah, I don't give a shit about justification most of the time. Not how I do things. Like, this is not me. I'm a weird person for this. Viper says the jury's out for me. I know my brain can't handle the accounting for an exponential increase in the pace of innovation. As the work multiplier appropriately used, AI gets better and better. Yeah. Like, this is what I think, like, I'm with you on that, Vipers. I think things are going to get extremely strange without needing artificial general intelligence. Things are just going to get really fucked up anyway. We don't need this, like, sci-fi sort of thing to happen for the weird results to still obtain. But yeah. Truth is the existence of a winning strategy in a game of logic, Globus. Do I have a better answer to that? But that's the answer from game theoretic semantics. That's what I use game theoretic semantics. It's the existence of a winning strategy in a logic game, and knowing it is all. I mean, you don't necessarily have to. It can be true without you knowing it, but then if you know it, that's usually what we mean by when you call something true, is that you have the strategy to show how to get that answer. Okay. So, if you are forced to conclude that your arguments fail to satisfy worth, if you don't know what you don't think you can be, your arguments are worthwhile, then your arguments would most likely be failures by your own lights. Boo. All right, so E. If I know that for most any article I'm working on today is highly probable that its main arguments suffer from standard flaws, then for most any article I'm working on today, it is improbable that its main arguments satisfy worth. See, again, on this definition of worth. And F, conclusion 1. From D&E, I know that for most any article I'm working on today, it is improbable that its main arguments satisfy worth. So if you think your philosophy is closer to this person, then you have to say most of your stuff is worthless. Probably is. Some philosophers will yawn at F, yeah, claiming that they don't really believe their conclusions anyway, or at least we're not aiming for worth. Yeah, see, this was kind of me. I'm yawning, and I'm like, that's all right. And the guy's like, well, okay. But I justify why I say that. I justified that. I'm more interested in interesting arguments than things that are, like, according to the rules set out here. All right, author says, but like many other philosophers, I would like to articulate arguments that satisfy worth. I work pretty hard on these arguments, and if they can't even meet the quite modest standards of 1 to 3, no, they're not modest. These are impossible standards, as you have argued in this paper. That is pretty bad. In fact, I think if I think my arguments has standard flaws, then I will probably conclude that I have little reason to accept the conclusion of that argument, at least on the basis of my supporting arguments. See, this is, again, the paradox of the preface. This is all that's happening here. It says, you know you fuck up. Your book is too long. Anything given enough time, there will be a mistake made. Always. Like, it's not interesting at that point, and it's already been claimed. But, like, they've wrapped the paradox of the preface in this sort of historical philosophical robe, but like that's fine, but like, yeah. All right, so that leads to the last premise. G. If I know that for most any article I'm working today is improbable that its main arguments satisfy worth, then I should suspend judgment on their conclusions unless I know of some other vastly superior reason to believe the conclusion. And H, conclusion 2. By effing G, I should suspend judgment on the conclusion of the main arguments unless I know of some other vastly superior reason to believe their conclusions. The unless clause is intended to cover philosophical arguments for conclusions that are commonsensical, such as much of what Hitler did was morally wrong, there are trees in North America, 2 + 2 is 4, and some tomatoes are at least partially red. Bryan, you just gotta ask out the girl or guy and accept you'll probably get rejected. Exactly. This is not why we do things. You're not doing things for formal correctness. Formal correctness is empty and vacuous and not very useful. If you're setting out formally correct things, this is like the Diogenes plucking a chicken and putting it in front of Plato when Plato was saying a person is a featherless biped. It's like, there you go. You've got a plucked chicken. That's not a man. It's like satisfying formal definitions is missing the point. Just is. And that's what this person gave here. It's like the wrong strategy for value and meaning. So it was just wrong. One might mount an argument for those theses and thus against various radical philosophical theories, even though one thinks that there are other non-philosophical reasons for them. I mean to set those aside merely because they raise special issues that I don't want to address here. Okay, so we're almost done. See, this is page 9 right there. We're done. The last few paragraphs. And I'm not going to be like super hard on this paper. I think it's interesting. It's just something I disagree with. What are the consequences of the unfortunate consequences? There's an obvious self-application issue. Why I think that my A through H argument is sound, given that it's a pretty typical philosophical argument offered by a pretty typical philosopher in regards to a topic that will probably go through negative epistemic upheaval. Set that issue aside and foolishly pretend for a moment that primary conclusions F and H are true. Yes, let's do negative meta-induction on this. What would that mean for the average professional philosopher? In his book on writing a memoir of the craft, Stephen King repeats the traditional wisdom that when it comes to novel writing, kill your darlings, even when it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart, kill your darlings. I wrote a novel, so I know firsthand how hard it is to do this. Part of what makes following kill your darlings advice is that it's entirely internal, since you have to go against yourself and not someone or something external. Many things in life are difficult, like making partner in a law firm, getting a contract as a professional athlete, dealing with a horrible boss, and learning a new language as an adult. These are largely external challenges, even the last one. But killing one of your own favorite characters or themes in your novel is like killing part of yourself. Suspending judgment on your own philosophical argument is somewhat similar to killing part of your story. You work for years on a series of arguments for a certain philosophical view, hundreds of hours are put into it, and the result seems to be a key part of you, one of your children. Deciding that the odds are very high that the arguments don't satisfy worth is quite low, a sort of self-inflicted one, like when the novelist realized that despite her tremendous efforts, her novel would be much better without one of her favorite themes or characters. Some novelists can't do the deed, so the theme or character remains in the novel. Some philosophers can't do the deed, so they don't suspend judgment. The good novelists do the deed. Okay, so this person... this is good advice. If you like something too much, you're probably not realizing the problems with it. That's fair advice. I agree with Stephen King. I was just telling some people the other day that if you like it too much, take it out of your paper. If it's not supporting the conclusion and you like it, the fact that you like it should be a red flag. Children are a protein source, arguments not so much. Yes. So it's completely fair, like the Stephen King advice. It works in philosophy too. If you like your arguments too much, then you're probably misusing them because you like them and they don't support your conclusion. But like, that's fair. Again, this person yawned at my rejection of their theory of worth, but that's fair. There's different kinds of philosophers. So I just like outright reject what this person says here. But. Lots of people do agree with this. They think their arguments are actually worthwhile. They think that it is part of being deductively sound or inductively strong. That's what people think. And so it's like, is this a bad article? No, I disagree with it. But if you are in the that sort of area of philosophy where you have to argue in this way, this person might have you in a sort of a problem. But that said, is just a version of the paradox of the preface. It's like, okay, there will be more to the story after you, in the future, and we don't have the whole story yet, and there will be a mistake eventually, and that's what this author is saying. There will be a mistake in the future, we just don't know what it is right now, and yeah. So, now that everyone's here, we've got to the end. If anyone has anything else to say, let me know, but let's get the review going. So, what do we think of this paper? Who is this paper for? And like here, how you rate papers is you put the emote that is on your screen now in chat. The emotes you type out by the names on the right, not on the left. So brain dance with the small B in the beginning and the big dance at secondly. That's for fun ideas. Was this a fun article? Did it make you think about stuff? If it made you think about certain things, cool, then you can put a brain dance. The grapes for big claims that shrivel up. Like, so did they make big claims, but then at the end have to pull them back because they weren't actually capable of making those claims? I think I'm going to have to give this one some nog grapes, actually, because they made some claims and then they were like, well, okay, but like, then, well, that's all right. But, they had to pull it back a little bit. And remember, anyone in chat is welcome to do it. So we've got Ivan Neal. We've got Unreal Bryan had a brain dance. Thought it was fun. Ivan Neal gave it a grapes, a brain dance, and a yay. And yeah, you can always just give it the generic thumbs up, thumbs down with vote yay or vote nay. And Unreal Bryan says also a navel gazing. Hey Johan, welcome in. Yeah, thank you for giving a rating. Navel gazing, yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a nog navel too. Because this is mostly, no one's gonna give a shit about this except for like, philosophers. It's kind of a fun article, but you can see this was even talking about philosophers to philosophers. Ouroboros, deep ancient mysteries, big ideas. And nah, I don't think this was talking about deep ancient things. Existential or artistic drama with the scream, no. Golden turd, all style, no substance. No, I think they made their argument and this was still poop underneath. But like, I just disagree with it. I don't know if you should really give it a turd because, they made their arguments, they made their case. I just disagree. And like, that's why it's not just poop underneath, they shriveled up. Because what happened was they have to back away from other positions. And like, I'm not in that. That's why it's a shrivel, not a piece of shit. It wasn't a piece of shit. And a knife for slice and dicing argument. Yeah, this was analytic philosophy. They can get themselves a nog knife. And I'm going to give them a vote yay. Also, but I'm going to give them 2 grapes. So this is nog grape. So there. That's my rating. So, anyone else want to jump in? Feel free. If not a bad article. Really not a bad article. Cinesemiotics says nay. Not for cinesemiotics. Cool. But like, it's not like, if this is in your, what the sort of philosophy you like, in the kind of philosophy that you do, then this might give you something to think about. This, to me, just seems like a reskinning of the paradox of the preface, which is okay. But like, again, then they had to pull it back. Like, it only is so limited. It only has so many consequences. Then I know what's happening. It's like a cross between a negative meta induction in philosophy of science and the paradox of the preface. It's kind of like a mashup between the two. And it's like, these are the funny things. It's like, oh, this person's saying, look, you don't have to read anything from the ancient past because they've made all these mistakes. It's like, well, let me tell you something about the negative meta induction. Oh, okay, so what? I know you guys can't see this, but let's see. Paradox of the prefix come from 1965. Now let's search Wikipedia for negative meta induction. Vipers gave it a nay. Negative meta induction. Sometimes it's called other things. Let's see. Alright, that didn't. Let's just search negative induction. Let's just see what that gets us. Let's see. Nog knife. Since I'm actually, you gotta, let's see. Try again, but use a capital K. Meta induction. Let's see, we're gonna do this. Pessimistic induction, that's what they're also called. Pessimistic induction is something scientific realism. Let's see. It was first fully postulated by Larry Loudon in 1981. So that's only 40 something years ago. So this would fall under the 50-year limit this person was talking about. But yeah, so pessimistic induction is also called pessimistic meta induction. So yeah. Thank you, Max. So yeah, but like, that's from 1981, but there's other things from before. Let's see. What is this? Okay, Viper says, the one thing I did like about it was that there was almost a dialogue between you. Occasionally the author would say, some philosophers would agree in this particular way, and you're like, yeah, I just did, but... Yeah, so this was an interesting thing because this is very much disagreeing with like my position, and this is one of the reasons I think that position is silly, is because it suffers from these sorts of problems. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense, but I understand that a lot of people are not like me. I'm an oddball, even in philosophy in certain areas. So, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how long this stuff... yeah, I mean, this goes back to Thomas Kuhn in the 60s. So it's like, this is not a new idea. Okay.